Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Some difficulty, that's good. It's good for spiritual life to have some difficulties. That's why, one of the reasons why India is good for spiritual life, because the atmosphere here fosters austerity. It's very good. Human life is not meant for sense gratification. We're not meant for comfortable living. If there are difficulties, that's good. It helps us to remind us that this material world is not a comfortable place to live in. So if there are so many difficulties, why should we be disturbed? So what? Great, very nice. We don't want to live in the illusion that life is very comfortable and very nice. Let me live comfortably. Let there be difficulties. There's a few difficulties. So much benefit is there. We have to take advantage of that. And as I was saying before, if there are difficulties, that increases our awareness, our tolerance. We can learn so many different things. And even if we think India is austere, quite honestly, it's much less austere than it used to be. Life in India was much more difficult 20 years ago. Anyway, we don't want to go on and on about the difficulties. Mostly, in any situation, in India or anywhere, mostly the difficulties are according to our perception of them. And two people can be in the same situation, and one is thinking, oh, this is so terrible, and the other just goes on, because it depends on how we react in our mind. Just like you have to take a cold bath in the morning. If you're contemplating how miserable it will be, then it takes you half an hour to even do it. And then you're just thinking how terrible it is. And they just go in 2 minutes, it's all over, finished. Because the matter of how you approach, that just get on with it, just do it, finished. And this way we go through difficulties. I think devotees that stay in India, one thing you have to have like a positive approach to life, because there are certain difficult. Life isn't so straightforward and easy. It's not that often things that in the West you might get just done with a phone call. It might take you 3 days of running around town to get it done in India, because things don't work so efficiently. Sometimes you get frustrated, but if you have like a positive attitude that we've got to get the job done, whatever the conditions are. Just like nowadays we print books, we do everything in the computer, and we print it out and we give it to the printer and he does it. But previously you had to write it, type it, retype it, then send it to the typesetter, and then you had to proofread it 10 times, and you had to go to the press so many times. So even in the Western world, previously things were more difficult. So people had to do things according to the situation. So the same thing in India. Whatever the situation, we have to get on with life and do it. One thing also, a sense of humor helps. In any situation where there's difficulty, if you can just laugh, instead of getting frustrated, it's good to have a sense of humor. Prabhupada had a sense of humor. Prabhupada said a gentleman should also have a sense of humor. So when there's so many difficulties, if you can just laugh, make some joke. Is then a different approach. Instead of being overwhelmed by the difficulties, you just laugh like that. So, that's just a general approach too. Now, I was talking about preaching in India. So preaching everywhere, it means we have to have a preaching spirit, but we have to know something about the specialized situation we're in. So when we say preaching in India, of course India, there's different states, and among Hindus there are different groups. There are different groups of Vaishnavas. There are Gauriya Vaishnavas, Sri Vaishnavas, Vallabh Sampradaya, and then even within those groups there's subgroups. Just like within the Gauriya Vaishnava Sampradaya there's Gauriya Mat, and there's so many branches and sub-branches, and there's different family trees of disciplic descendants, and then there's Sri Sampradaya, and then there are offshoots of original Sampradayas like Ramanandis and Swami Narayan, who are supposed to be, they think they're Vaishnavas, actually they're Mayavadis, and there's so many different groups, and there's so many different within the Indian culture. It's actually it's like what's that word? It's like a kaleidoscope of different ingredients which blend together. It's not that you say, preaching in India is just like this, because there's so many regional differences. Just like if you're in Bengal, you'll find if you're preaching in the villages especially, you'll find a lot of Sahajiya Vaishnavism. And then if you're preaching, for instance, in Tamil Nadu, you'll find a lot of people who are interested in worshipping Kartikeya and Lord Shiva. And everywhere you'll find the Mayavad ideas, or you'll find bogus gurus. But there's different, just like in Maharashtra, worship of Ganesh is very strong, or in Gujarat, worship of Krishna is very strong, but side by side there's worship of Mother Ambe. And there's regional differences. So in whatever region you're in, if you spend some time, you'll find there are different prominent ideas which you may have to study a little bit to understand, to speak to the people. Just like I was in Bangladesh many years, and people used to quote some lines from Chaitanya Bhagavat. And they used to quote this to say that this proves that there's another incarnation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that's just an example. You might have to study some things which you might not study. Just like in the West, if you're preaching, you might study, for instance, something about science. You might do that in India also if you're preaching in the colleges, just to have a little specialized knowledge of what you're dealing with. So in the same way in India, just like for instance, it's quite common, people will ask you things, well, in the Ramayana this, what do you think about it? In the Ramayana, Lord Ram, he worships Lord Shiva, so this proves Lord Shiva is supreme. Or you'll find that people say, well, in Mahabharata, Lord Krishna praises Lord Shiva as supreme. So what do you say about this? Or you'll find people, they say there are different incarnations of God, and we accept him as an incarnation of God, and because he did this and he did that, and you'll find so many different things, worship of different demigods, and Swami so-and-so said this, and you'll find different, there are so many different things. Actually, it's practically unlimited, the number of things that people can say. And it's unlimited nonsense. So many nonsense things people say. But sometimes, because it sounds, it's just like in preaching everywhere. That's the phantasmagoria of Maya. Sometimes people say things which sound they sound as if they're very solid and it's difficult to preach against. But actually, if we study Prabhupada's books thoroughly and chant our rounds nicely and pray to Krishna, we can defeat anybody. Just even if we know Bhagavad Gita as it is thoroughly, any philosophy we can defeat. But it may be useful also if we're spending some time here, or if we're preaching to Indians outside of India, to know some of these different things. So maybe we could discuss a few of these things. If some of you had some questions, you were going to ask some questions about Ramanandis and Swami Narayan. So if you have any questions like that, it's good to know. But many times people will ask you things you never heard of before. I mean, people come out with all kinds of funny things. It's like a good imagination. Hinduism means that people have applied their intelligence very carefully how to avoid Krishna. It's like actually it's very clear, the Vedic literatures are there that we should surrender to Krishna. So people know this, the Shastras are there, the Acharyas have come and spoken, but it's like very, very diligently applied intelligence how to take the absolute truth and readjust it so as to come out as something completely different and nonsense. And how to make a good show of being religious, how to be very religious and pious without surrendering to Krishna. This is Hinduism. So this is what we're dealing with. Now, of course, India, it is not only Hinduism, it's the second biggest Muslim population in the world after Indonesia. It's even more than Pakistan, the Muslim population in this country. So we're mostly concentrating on preaching to Hindus, because that's a huge job in itself. But actually Prabhupada, he wanted preaching to Muslims also. If we find at the present time, especially, there's been a lot of tension made by politically minded people between Hindus and Muslims. But actually Prabhupada, if you go through all of Prabhupada's writings and his conversations and his letters, he never said anything against Islam. And he used to say that he said instead of condemning these people, he said that the Hindu leaders, they should have brought these people back. He said they didn't come from outside. The Muslims, the majority of the population were Indian people who were previously worshipping Krishna or different demigods. So they should be brought back. He said those who are low class and fallen, they should be purified. So he said, why don't you try to do that? And I did it in the Western countries. If you're so concerned about the Muslims, instead of condemning them, why don't you pick them up? That's much better. So actually to date, our movement has done very little in the line of preaching to Muslims in India, or anywhere in the world for that matter. And it is very sensitive and difficult. I know in Bangladesh, whenever we made Muslim devotee, it became a very sensitive thing. They had to leave the country because it's dangerous. It's dangerous means the person himself, who we, for want of a better word, convert, may be in danger of his life, and we could ourselves be thrown out of the country. It's it's very difficult people. They're very fanatical. That word is used, and it's not an incorrect description at all. If a Muslim, Prabhupada actually, he told that he knew many Muslims who used to worship Krishna. He told there was one professor in Allahabad. He every Janmashtami used to write something for was it Allahabad or Aligarh? I can't remember. He used to write something about Krishna on Janmashtami, and he was completely a devotee of Krishna, but from a social point of view, he had to maintain himself as a Muslim. So that's a very big field, preaching to Muslims. And actually, Prabhupada said in Bangladesh, he said that if we do kirtan, the Muslims there will be attracted. That's the best way to preach them. They'll naturally be attracted. Krishna consciousness is attractive to everybody. So if we have, of course, it is very difficult. There's no doubt about it, because the way Islam is taught in this country, especially, it's very interesting. If you go, like, for instance, to Dubai or anywhere in the Middle East, you'll find there are Muslims there there are local Muslims, Arabian Muslims, that means. Then there's Iranian Muslims, Iraqi Muslims, there are Arabs also. Then there's Bangladeshi, Filipinos, and there's Pakistani and Indian Muslims. There's all kinds of Muslims from different backgrounds. So the most fanatical, it's not actually the Pakistani Muslims, it's the Indian Muslims. And the Pakistanis are the next most fanatical. And if you meet Muslims in other countries, they're usually not so fanatical, but somehow or other Islam in this country, it's being promoted as something very much against the mother culture of this country. So it's a very, very difficult situation, because people are brought up in a kind of hatred of this culture. So it's just like if a kirtan group goes past, many times you'll find riots are started in this country because some kirtan group or Hindu festival is going past a mosque, and then they protest, you can't chant here. And they say, well, why not? And then there's a riot and so many people are killed. So there's an atmosphere of intolerance. So it's very difficult, but it's not impossible. Probably the best thing for preaching Islam among Muslims in this country is that we've seen that a few years ago. Ravanari Prabhu, who was from a Lebanese Muslim, that means Palestinian mullah family, which is considered in great esteem by Muslims around the world. Someone who's from an Arabic, particularly from that area, from mullah family. So he's saying I'm from the 13th generation mullah family, and he was preaching in India Krishna consciousness. And mostly the Muslims, many of them, they didn't believe actually. They thought it was just a show. How could he be a devotee of Krishna? When they come to realize it was true, it had a tremendous effect on their consciousness, just really shattered them. So we need more of that. Actually, there are many, many people from Muslim families joining our movement in the ex-CIS, you'll find. But they're not, well, where are the real Muslims? It's difficult to say. They keep dogs and so many things. But that's one big problem. If anyone wants to get a lot of mercy, they can preach among Muslims. And if you can bring Indian Muslims to Krishna consciousness, you're going to go back to Godhead. It's a big field. How many people? It's 180 million people, 150 million Indian Muslims. It's a lot of people. It's a good field. Wear a bulletproof vest when you're doing it. Another thing is Christianity. Christianity is also it's an increasing religious force in India. Of course, when we use these terms, they're like real religion means surrender to Krishna, but when we're talking in like social terms here, so Christianity, it's been in India since very, very early days. Since about I can't remember exactly, about 500 AD, something like that, when so-called explorers from Europe came to Kerala and they found so many Christians, they were shocked. So anyway, then later on the Christians came and they made a few converts here and there, and especially in Goa, they had many converts to Christianity. Yeah. And then there was that Francis Xavier, the saint. He converted people with the sword, great saint. But Christianity is making a lot of progress, for want of a better word, in India now, especially in South India. It's really growing fast, and it's the methods they have of making people Christian and no philosophy. One book they made, How to Preach to Hindus. They said, the most important thing you should know when you're preaching to Hindus, don't speak any philosophy. Don't speak any philosophy, because if you speak philosophy, then, well, there is no philosophy in Christianity, so what are you going to speak? I mean, even the most hodgepodge Hindu has got more philosophy than Christianity. But it's just make friends with people. Ask them to pray with you, they say. Don't speak philosophy, ask them to pray with you. Just see, the people, they have a natural inclination to pray, and they think if I pray in the church or if I pray in the temple, it's all the same thing, because God is everywhere. And then you gradually bring them. So, my analysis is, one reason why Christians are being so successful in India is because people have a natural tendency to bhakti. But what is being taught is mayavad, where you pray whichever way you like, you pray to any god, and do whatever you like, and it's all the same. But people want some direction, whereas in Christianity they say, here is Jesus, pray to Him, He will deliver you. That's what people want. They want something clear and straightforward. This is what I tell you. So many times these Hindus, so-called Hindu leaders, come to us and say, what, you have to help us fight Christianity. I say, it's not us, it's your fault. They're becoming Christians because of your mumbo-jumbo preaching, that everything's all the same. People want direction. They want to be told, this is the correct path, but you're not telling it to them. Well, you should join us and help us to preach Krishna consciousness, which is the real path of bhakti. Because what happens when they become Christians, they actually become extremely offensive. To solidify their Christianity, they completely reject. It's like talking to a wall or something. Someone who becomes a Christian, they think that anything that anyone says which is not in line with Christianity, it's just like the same as in the West, born again Christians. You can't speak to them at all. Actually, good preaching, nice preaching to Christians is among people who have been Christians for several generations, who are brought up in Christian family. They're not really that concerned about Christianity. It's just they happen to be born in a Christian family. So they're often very good candidates, but they often make very good devotees. Indian Christians from backgrounds which are not hardcore Christian. Because you find that actually a few years ago the Christian churches, they were afraid that Hare Krishna. But we're just talking about Goa. He's from Goa. A Hindu family. Anyway, we're all spirit soul. A few years ago, the Christian churches in India, they were afraid that Christianity was just going to merge into Hinduism. Because if you went to a Christian home, you'd find they'd have a picture of Jesus, and they'd put a garland on, and they'd offer arati like this. So they're afraid it's just, and they have their Christian festivals, and the Hindus will also join in. But now this Protestant, like Baptist type Christianity, is very strongly preaching, and they're making a lot of converts by very devious means. Among poor people, they tell them, well, what's the value of your being a Hindu? What do the Hindus do? Well, why don't you become a Christian? We'll give education to your children. We'll give them English medium education. We'll give you a chicken every Sunday and a bag of rice, and you can get a job in our school. And in this way, just by completely. And they know that these people they convert is like low class poor people. They convert. They say don't care about it. It doesn't matter. They'll never be Christians. They'll take it only for the material gain. They'll call themselves a Christian, but we'll educate their children. We'll capture their children. This is one tactic. And then among more higher class people, what they do, they concentrate on the women. And they say, because women often, they have, modern age especially, they have so many problems and this and that. So they're kind to them, they're nice to them, say, come, why don't you come with us and Jesus will give you shelter. They speak to them in a very sentimental way. Say, better don't tell your husband. And when the woman's completely convinced, then they bring the children. And so many, many times I've seen families where it's like the husband, he didn't know what was going on. He's completely frustrated. His wife and children are Christians, and he's not in the slightest bit interested in this. His family's split up and so many things like that. So it's an increasingly, it actually gives us some inspiration to preach more. That in Bangladesh, I know when we were preaching there, that Christianity was rampant among the conversion to Islam, and Christianity was rampant among the Hindus because they were cut off politically from India, and the Muslims were telling them that Hinduism, it's all. Of course, we don't call ourselves Hindus, but people identify ourselves as such. So they were saying there were so many conversions to Islam because people, they felt that no one was preaching, no one came to the Hindus to preach anything to them because they're afraid. And then we're going all over the country, and people are just so delighted because I was saying that in different parts of India there's different manifestations of Hinduism. So in Bangladesh, East Bengal, the traditional Hinduism is worship of Gaur Nitai, Radha Krishna with Kirtan, chanting Hare Krishna. So people were so delighted to see us. And then one Hindu leader came to us, and he was saying that he said, we're very happy with your movement because wherever you go, the tendency for people to convert to Islam and Christianity is completely stopped. And even people that converted, they come back again also. So we were saying to him, we were just like joking with him. No, it's not exactly joking, pushing him, saying, well, what's the benefit? What's the great benefit if they're Christian? You're Hindus, they're not following anything anyway, so what's the benefit? So you're going on like this with Gauranga. I said, yes, all right, we agree. Better they stay in. So that is some impetus for us to preach also, that people who are so many generations, their families, they're chanting Hare Krishna, or they're not, maybe not chanting Hare Krishna, at least they're following Vedic culture, at least some basic principles, respecting the cows. When they become Christian, they become cow killers, and they take pride in it. So it's a very horrible thing, and they become blasphemous to the Vedas and to the Acharyas and to Krishna. So it's a challenge for us. The Christians, they recognize that India is a very good field for preaching, that people have a very strong spiritual need, it's not being fulfilled, and it's a good field for them to work. And Islam, there's also millions of dollars being pumped into this country for Islam. Wherever you go all over the country, there's mosques being built everywhere. So the Christians and Muslims, they're busy making converts, and so we should also be busy to save the people from degradation. Another thing, we're talking about different groups, they're preaching. See, Indian people, they're naturally devotees. The Prabhupada said that every Indian, even a Muslim, they're all naturally Krishna conscious. But at the same time, their minds are confused by so many different ideas. And at least previously India was a land of philosophy. Nowadays it's very cheap the way people are following, just like there's so many followers of Sai Baba, or in the last few years this Asaram rascal has become very prominent. That many people, they're just looking for some kind of leadership. They want someone to lead them, and some people are taking advantage of it, even among him. Sometimes people come up to me and say that well, what should we do about so many Christians and Muslims? They're making comments. Well, in some ways it's better they be Christians or Muslims, because at least they believe in one God. In Hinduism you have so many gods, you have so many funny ideas. And at least they accept that the one God is supreme. They don't take some rascal Sai Baba to be God. So I say to them, what is the value of your Hinduism if so many people are following Sai Baba? This means that the whole thing is sick. And how can people accept this rascal as God? So even within the sphere of Hinduism, there's so many nonsense things, and to sort out the nonsense from what is sense. What is sense is that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We're all His servants, and anything else outside of this is nonsense. It doesn't make any sense because it's not true. But people take it that anything, whatever you like, this Ram Krishna rascal made this Jata Mat Tata Pat. Everything's alright. Whatever you do, everything's okay. Hippie philosophy. The original hippie. Ram Krishna. So people have this idea that whatever you do, it's okay. Eating fish is okay. Eating meat's okay. Everything's okay. Don't do any religious practice. Everything's alright. I'm God, you're God, everything's God. So people's minds very much confused due to lack of education. So there's a need for preaching. What to do? What can we do? We have to preach, that's all. We have to preach. We should preach very strongly. That class this morning, great class by the mp3 Swami. And we have to speak the truth strongly. Compromising won't help. Compromising means that people will always remain compromised. They may smile at us and think, oh yeah, Hare Krishna people are nice, but they'll never be convinced. And if they think we're nice, that means just like the guy, everyone smile like this, false smile. The whole material world, everyone's going on with a superficial smile on their face. But there's no substance behind it. There's no reality behind it. There's no real good feeling. Just as someone say, yes, he's nice, he's nice, he's nice. But no one has any feeling for each other because they can't unless they have knowledge of Krishna. Unless there's relationship with Krishna, then everything is superficial. So the real love for Krishna and for other living beings will be if we tell people very straightforwardly and clearly that everything you are doing, you may not like it, but everything you're doing is nonsense if you don't surrender to Krishna. That Prabhupada, there's this book called I'm Okay, You're Okay. This is some philosophy, how to live in this material world happily. That what you think, Christine, you think I'm okay. And whatever everyone else does, that's also okay. It's again hippie philosophy. Everything's okay. Hitler's okay. Everything's nice. Hitler killed all the Jews, very good. You're okay. I'm okay, you're okay. So when Prabhupada heard this, he said, our philosophy is not that. Our philosophy is, I'm okay, you're not okay. So this is the fact. This is preaching. Sometimes people think we're very puffed up. Let them think what they like. But our duty is to speak, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. We should speak, especially in India. Prabhupada himself was preaching so strongly and so heavily. So strongly. Why are you giving up your culture? Why are you imitating these Buddha? There was this one lecture Prabhupada gave in Madras, public lecture. I think in that lecture he must have used the word Buddha about 30 times. And he was talking about the people who were listening to the lecture. Why are you acting like Buddha? Imitating the Buddha. This life, simply eat, sleep, work, no spiritual life, no quest for God. This is simply Buddha, again and again and again. And at the end, everyone clapped Prabhupada. They appreciated it. Because he was speaking straight. Not always. So one time in Pandal, Prabhupada in these Pandals in Bombay especially was so heavy. And one time quite a lot of people got up and left. Prabhupada was so strong. He was so strong. But he didn't. And after that Prabhupada said, therefore book distribution is our better preaching because people, they don't become so much offended. But then again, the next night he was again the same thing. Because Prabhupada was so upset to see that people who are born in India, they have the chance to very easily perfect their life and go back to Godhead. But instead, there's one time Prabhupada said, you see, this is India, this is the land of Krishna and Rama and the Rishis and the Ganga and the Yamuna. And in India, people are asking for disco. This is Kali Yuga. Or, you see another horrible thing. You'll see people, they come in Sri Vaishnava family, for instance, Brahmin family. For generations they worship Shalagram Shiva, they worship Sri Ranganath Swami, Lord Vishnu. And now they're worshipping this Sai Baba. Their fathers, their forefathers, if they could see this, they would have become brahmacharis and never had any children. that if my descendant is going to worship this rascal as God, it's the most disgusting thing. And this person, he's actually in such mind, he actually believes, I think he believes he's God, he actually believes it himself. I think he must believe it himself, otherwise how could he convince others? But he's wrong. You see, in South India it's very common, the people, they used to rise early in the morning and chant Vishnu Sahasranam and Sri Venkatesh Suprabhata. This is some song for waking up. Balaji, Tirupati Balaji, Lord Vishnu. So now they sing that same song for worshipping Balaji, but instead of the name of Balaji, they put the name of Sai Baba. The same song, that you are the maintainer of all the worlds, you are the resting place of Mother Lakshmi. Now please, our dear Sai Baba. So it's very, very sinful. And when you see these things, how can we not preach? We have to. How can we see this? That people, they come from such a good background, pious background, and they're spoiling their lives in the most horrible way. That their whole culture is meant, such an elevated culture, that is meant for taking them back to Godhead, and instead they're going to the darkest hell. But their propensity to worship, they're putting it in the wrong place and going to hell. So what does it matter? If you have a pain in your belly and it's too hot, there's so much work to be done. Anyway, there's so many things. Preaching in India is somewhat specialized, in as much as you may have to learn a little bit about the culture and so many. What are the different bogus ideas people are speaking about, and you gradually get to learn. Are there any the clerk in the Indian Railways, and then he became an incarnation of God? Yeah, there's so many things. So you have to. Yeah, actually there's some very good lines, just like this, some verses we should learn. What is the definition of God? People say, I think so-and-so is God. What do you mean by God? What is the meaning of God? And they'll say, well, all-powerful. No, this is the definition of God. You should learn this shlok. Aishvaryasya samagrasya viryasya yashashashya jnana vairagya yostraiva shandam bhaga itingana. 6 opulences in full. All wealth, all strength, all knowledge, all beauty, all fame, and all renunciation. So you go through all strength, then again, what is the definition there? Yatova imani bhutani jayante, yena jatani jivanti, yat prayanti abhisangvishanti, tad vijigyasasva tad brahmeti. This is the definition of the absolute truth. That from which everything emanates, that in which everything rests, and that which maintains everything, and that into which everything goes at the time of dissolution. This is the absolute truth. So you really think this guy who's doing some magic tricks, he is the source of all creation? You can go through all the qualities. All strength, that means he's controlling all the universes. Do you really think this person? Then you come to the point, all beauty. And then he's finished. This is the proof. I mean, he's actually one of the most ugly people. I'm saying Sai Baba because he's prominent. Another thing is, you find in different areas. You see, in Gujarat they say Swami Narayan, Sahajanand Swami is God. Well, God means Jagannath, God for everybody. Why only for the Gujaratis? There's no only Gujaratis follow Swami Narayan. Why only for, and not all the Gujaratis. So how is he God if only for the Gujaratis? And then in Bengal there's a whole rash of Bhagavans because there's a lot of poor people in Bengal, and it's one way of making a living is to become God. At least people feed you. So that I used to say when I was traveling in Bangladesh, that people say Bangladesh is a very poor country and very unfortunate, but actually I think that Bangladesh is the most fortunate country in the world because there are unlimited universes with unlimited planets in them. And for all these unlimited universes, there's only one God, but in Bangladesh, in every village, there's an incarnation of God. So this way, so many things you can say. You should learn what is the definition of God, and then test. Is this God? Gujarati God, and then in Maharashtra you have another God who is also a Muslim. Then Muslim became God. Shirdi Sai Baba. This incarnation of God business, it's really envious. Prabhupada said also about demigod worship, he said that we have to be very active to preach against this. No compromise with this. He said people in India, they're very much addicted to this, so we have to preach very vigorously against it. Otherwise people, they'll always be stuck in this demigod worship.
I had a few questions when you said about demigod. Is it offensive to deny worship of demigods? Also, we have to know the philosophy of those different, whether Ramakrishna Mission, what is their philosophy?
What is their philosophy? That's what Prabhupada used to say. Well, I'm a follower of Vivekananda, someone may say. They say, oh, so what is his philosophy? And many times they don't know. Then you can tell them. Actually, this Vivekananda rascal, he says, throw out tulsi, plant begun, plant eggplant, because what is the value of tulsi? With eggplant you can cook it and eat it. Bengalis are very fond. Another thing he said is, don't read Bhagavad Gita, play football. That's what he said, one of his quotes. He said, because people, they need to get strong bodies. Because that quote is there in Shastra, Valena hina, what is that? Naivam atma pravachanena, Valena hina. Without strength, you cannot understand the soul. So he said, you have to develop your body. That's the case, then the buffalo should have been the greatest saint. When it says Bala means spiritual strength. So many nonsense things. And he himself was a meat eater. And he used to smoke. And this Ramakrishna rascal, he used to eat cow's meat. People don't know these things. You tell them. Because he came to his wonderful conclusion that all paths are the same, because for some days he lived as a Muslim. So when he was practicing Islam, to be a very good Muslim, he also ate cow's meat. So this is your so-called incarnation of God. And he says, Jata Matatapat. What does Krishna say? Ma sarvadhamang parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. It's exactly opposite to what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. So we should know these things. If you know a few details, it's very useful. Another thing they say, Madhava Seva is Madhava Seva. Then why is Madhava Seva recommended? Then you just simply serve the Madhavas. You don't have to serve Madhava. Then why in the Shastra is it recommend you do puja like this? Obviously there's a difference. Another very common thing is they say Atma and Paramama are the same. Then why are there two different words? If it's the same thing, why are there two different words? Param means superior. Superior means different. There's so many different things.
Atma so Paramatma.
Yeah, they say the jiva becomes Shiva, but that's just a jingling rhyme. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a jingle. It doesn't mean anything.
I want to ask, there is a clause that just now one guest or one guy, he had Loknath Maharaj. Yes.
Loknath Brahmachari?
I think this is a beard, the white beard.
Yes, Loknath Brahmachari.
Yeah.
He's sitting with his leg on like that. Yeah, it's very common in Bengal.
What is with him?
He's not as bogus incarnation.
He's bogus.
Of course he's bogus.
He says he's an arrangement.
Yeah, he's bogus.
Yeah. And another question.
Of course he's bogus means if he's not a Vaishnava, he's bogus. And
so
see what it is. Many of these sadhus, they do some austerities, or from previous life they have some mystic powers. And they show that, and then they advertise themselves as God. And people are fooled because they don't have knowledge of the science of God. That's why Prabhupada was always speaking philosophy. Prabhupada didn't just go and tell some nice stories, Krishna stealing the butter, and very nice story. Prabhupada gave philosophy. That we should understand what is the actual point. Otherwise the whole of Hinduism is running on sentimentalism. But Prabhupada gave philosophy. You should understand clearly what is the fact. Not just some nice stories and then you talk all rubbish. You'll find even the Mayavadis, what do they talk? If you go and listen to the Mayavadis lecture, you think they talk about everything is one, everything is Brahman. They don't talk like that, because if they talk like that, no one will come to listen to them. It's boring as hell. They tell stories from Mahabharata and they say, just like Draupadi, she only when she put her two hands up, then only Krishna said, we have to surrender fully to God. And if you listen, it sounds like Bhakti, but then at the end, I know because I listened to the whole lecture once. So one of these Shankaracharyas, I was at Kumbh Mela, so he had a huge tent. What's this guy talking about? He's bringing people in. So he told all these nice stories from Mahabharata, and at the end he said, and the thing you have to realize, after speaking all this thing about bhakti and surrender to God, they say the same thing. And at the end he said, and the most important thing you have to realize is that you are all God. And that was the end of his lecture. And the thing is that people think, oh, it's all nice, it's all bhakti, and even the so-called Vaishnavas, they're also, most of them, so-called Vaishnavas, unless there's strong preaching, what happens is the so-called Vaishnava Sampradayas, they also become full up with Mayavad, because they think, well, the Mayavadis are saying the same thing, and they're not so bad, we don't want to fight with them, and, they're also nice people, they're also worshipping God. They also, you'll find most of the so-called Vaishnavas, they're all mixed up, and they're also Mayavadis, and they don't have firm faith in Krishna. And unless we preach strongly among ourselves and outside also, we'll also become wishy-washy. And we'll say, well, it's not so bad. The people in Mayavad, they're not so bad. They're also quite nice. But they are bad. They're very sinful. Anyone who thinks that anyone is slightly equal to Krishna is greatly sinful. It destroys bhakti. Therefore we have to know philosophy. Therefore Prabhupada was continuously speaking philosophy. What is the difference between Jiva and Bhagavan? What are the 5 differences? Difference between the different jivas, difference between the jiva and material nature, difference between jiva and God, difference between different material objects. We should see difference. Everything is different. This cup is different to this book. Is it a fact or not? Obviously it's a fact. But Mayavad philosophy says there's no difference. This is what they're saying. It's nonsense. There's no difference between this and this. There's no difference between me and you. There's no difference between me and Krishna. This is what they say. It's all the same. There's no God in control. So we should know. It's not that everyone who's offering some incense, that means they have some devotional inclination, but mostly it's completely contaminated. Therefore we have to give the proper philosophy.
Questions. Now you say India is the land of rishis, Ram and Krishna, then we also see from Valmiki Ramayana and what Ram performed, they also performed karma kanda. When Dasharatha died, then Lord Ramchandra went to Saryu, and there he performed all sorts of karma kanda. But at the same time we don't, and it is also part of Vedas.
See, these are the kind of questions you get in India.
So, I'm talking these are the questions that my parents and other friends put up to me, so I want you to answer them. So, you have to see that it is also part of Vedas. Vedic karma kanda is also part. And when we say Vedic scriptures, that also comes in that. So, how is it that we don't say that karma kanda is a good thing and we should not compare it? It's okay we don't compare it, but at the same time, should we avoid it? Should we not promote it? Once it is a part of Vedas and it is to be executed here in India, people are very much used to it and they have been doing it since the time in memorial.
But one thing is, can you follow karma kanda fully and properly as was done previously? No, you cannot do it. Every home has an attached bathroom. That means the whole house is contaminated. You can't do any puja. You can't even live in the house. You're living in the toilet. Your home is unfit. If you're going to do karma kanda, then you have to do so many things. When you rise in the morning, you have to spend several hours making offerings to different demigods, to forefathers, offering sacrifices. Can you do it? Do you do it? No. Do you even know that you're supposed to do it and you're talking about karma kanda? Do you know what karma kanda is? Your idea of karma kanda is you go to the office, earn some money and watch the television. That's not karma kanda. Karma kanda means you have to spend several hours a day doing different rituals. You're not doing it, nor is it practical to do it in the modern age. And anyway, all those rituals, they are meant for material enjoyment, but they invoke Krishna. All the karma kanda rituals, they are ultimately offering to Krishna. So the Vedic, when we're talking about following the Vedas, you have to see that the Vedas prescribe different activities for different people in different times and circumstances. So karma kanda is not recommended in this Kali Yuga because no one can do it. You can't do it, nor I haven't seen anyone who is doing it. Just like the tap water you use. You can't use that water for anything, it's contaminated. You have to take water from a sacred river, or you have to take water from a well which is used only by pure people. Otherwise you can't drink the water, you can't use it for puja or anything. So there are so many different things which are not following. Therefore in this age, it is recommended in the scripture, Hare Nama, Eva Kevalam, Kalo Nasteva, Gati Ranyata. If you want to follow the Vedas, you have to chant Hare Krishna. Lord Ram came again in Kali Yuga as Lord Chaitanya, and he taught everyone to chant Hare Krishna. He didn't teach irresponsibility. That's also a point. He didn't teach that everyone should simply abandon their families. We're not teaching that. When Hare Krishna, Lord Chaitanya himself, because he had important work to do, he took sannyas. But in his family life, he also went to Gaya to offer pinda to the Vishnupad there for his father, for his deceased father. But then anyway, that's another discussion. People say you have to give up your family. That's not, we don't generally encourage this. If you're in family life, if you have your own family responsibility, you should discharge that in Krishna consciousness. But if you're going to talk about following the Vedas, then according to the Vedas, in Kali Yuga you should chant Hare Krishna. And you can't follow karma kanda anyway, so in Treta Yoga it was being followed, but in this age you can't.
So in India, people are generally illiterate. When you say that Prabhupada said the best way to preach is to distribute books.
Yeah, this question came up yesterday already. Yeah, the best way is to distribute books, because the more educated people, who anyway they're the ones who are speaking any philosophy at all, they're totally confused. Let them read the books, and then they'll speak to the others. And the other people, we engage them in chanting Hare Krishna and give them prasad. And when they see the more educated people, they've understood the right path, they'll follow it also. So you had some question?
Is there any chance that some person who can go according to Karma Kanda, like
can go where?
Can go to the different planets.
Go to where? Can anyone follow it properly?
Yeah.
It's practically impossible to follow Karma Kanda properly, because for Karma Kanda everything has to be pure. The place, the time, and everything in Kali Yuga is contaminated. Anyway, even if they do, what's the value?
Read amongst the devotees sometimes.
There are pious activities like visiting holy places.
Like one devotee said, yeah, my father before he died, he was seeing Durga. Always.
Oh, so many things you see like that. In my dream I saw Durga and so many things. It may or may not be true, but we have to see what you do when you wake up from your dreaming. What do you see? People say, in my dream I saw Krishna, very nice, but then when you got up you had a cup of tea. So what was the value of your seeing Krishna in a dream? When you read Bhagavad Gita, you're also seeing Krishna. You have to take advantage. So many people, I saw Krishna in a dream and so many things. That's not the process of spiritual realization. The process of spiritual realization is hearing from authorities and following. You may have dreams or not dreams, it's not that important.
The BBT kind of 95 was printed in England. We were selling it
What are you talking about?
I want to say that there were Durga and
what's that?
In BBT calendar.
Yeah, I don't know why they do this. I don't think it's a very good policy.
My mother was very happy to see the worshipping of demigods in Bombay temple, and she was very encouraged to see that.
I'm very discouraged. When did it happen?
No, like they have all the photographs and other deities also.
Yeah, but they also have writings saying that how the different demigods are servants of Krishna. Why don't they read the writing also?
Yeah, she didn't follow. She just thought, I had never been to the temple, but she was very much encouraged to see that.
There is no demigods.
They have dioramas around. Yeah, they have Ganesh. They have Ganesh.
Ganesh is worshipping.
They have Ganesh writing the Mahabharata with Vyasadeva.
Yeah, but Ganesh is writing, Vyasadeva is saying it's not a demigod.
Very careful. Actually, the GBC passed a resolution this year because some of our devotees in America, it seems, they've been encouraging demigod worship to bring Indian people in more, but this is very destructive. It's easy to bring people in and they'll give some donations, but the whole thing will become useless. It's better we don't have anyone coming than if we water it all down and make it nonsense.
So immediately they are asked to leave teaching worship or the demigods worship, they get a bit opposing kind. But if they are allowed to do that, and at the same time there's...
No, we're not going to come in their house with a machine gun and stop them. But we're going to tell them that this is not for your ultimate benefit. They have to be convinced to stop it.
With my mother, that she had not changed completely, like after chanting, and also she was doing all kind of worship. But now she has slowly realized that, I worship them and I...
But how does she realize? Someone has to tell her.
Yeah, of course.
You have to tell her. Unless you speak, they won't know.
Slowly it comes to the...
Yes, slowly means we speak, and then people, they may become convinced. Some slowly, some less slowly.
If we talk very strictly, like, then they don't, and they get completely...
It may be. It may be. We see our acharyas, generally they spoke very straightforwardly. People may accept or not accept. We have to be sensitive in our preaching, but at the same time we have to see that if we try to make it palatable for the sake of according to the palate of the people, then we're in danger of watering down our message.
Maharshi, you mentioned in Bhakti, you mentioned that the worship of temples is not recommended, but we should respect because it's coming from Krishna. They are the administrators.
Yes, this is a very important point, which many people. Because you're something from them. but we respect them as servants of Krishna. So if we explain this, that we're not against the demigods, we give them all respect, but we do not recommend their worship because that is against your own self-interest and that is actually blocking your worship of Krishna. So if we explain that, then generally people they can understand, unless they're down-headed and close-minded. About what?
9 days of festival.
Navratri. Yeah.
Can you explain that and how that fits into Krishna?
It doesn't have anything to do with Krishna consciousness. It's a festival of Durga worship. It's a traditional Vedic or Hindu festival.
I don't think you've really answered my question yesterday.
Which question is that?
Well, I was slotting,
Oh, right, that's, yeah, I didn't
I
actually.
slot in to kind of get, it was a good program to plug into.
Oh, no, yeah, actually, yeah, I didn't say that. I opened up the class saying that I was going to answer that, and I didn't. I must say that my presentation has been all over the place. And, yeah, coming to India, if you want to come to stay, I did actually speak about this a little bit before. It's good to work under some authority. Of course, in your situation it may be different because you're already a proper disciple, senior devotee, but if there's devotees who are coming here, it's very good to work under an authority. Otherwise, the tendency is to make your mind the authority, which is very dangerous. Now, generally, I recommend that devotees, when they're coming first new to India, it's good to stay in one center for a few months and just get, because the temple life is a little sheltered, so it's good to just adjust, stay in one temple, and just get adjusted to the climate and the culture and the food and everything. And then afterwards, go out some maybe traveling, preaching, before you go traveling. And it's good to go with someone who's an experienced preacher. Usually someone who comes new, we send them out with someone just as an assistant. It may take some time. You may not be doing that much like heavy preaching. Although some, like these they just joined the movement in Yugoslavia. We shipped them out. No, they didn't even join them. We just shipped them out to India and sent them out in the villages right away. They just got right into it. But that's usually, I recommend devotees spend some time in the temple and get some nice association. It's maybe better to go to you have to go to a temple where the atmosphere is quite nice. Some of the smaller temples, it's a little bit of a struggle, So it's not so much, maybe a big temple like Mayapur or Vrindavan, get some good association, stay with it, and then after some time you can see where to fit in. Just like in any case, if you're going to change your service, even it's good to discuss. Usually this comes out after devotees have been a few years in the movement. First few years you just basically do whatever you're told. But then after some time you may think, well, what am I going to do with my whole life? Then you may discuss with your town president and your spiritual master what I should do. Maybe I should specialize as a cook, or I should specialize as a writer or a secretary or a pujari. So like that, when you come to India, it's good to work with someone who's experienced in working in the country and work under their guidance or with their assistance and just see where to fit in. There's plenty of room for everybody to do whatever you're doing. Another thing is, even after all this talk about preaching, you may think, well, I know sometimes devotees, they think, well, I'm not really cut out to be a big preacher myself. I don't know if I could do it. That's all right. You can also preach, like I said. You can assist preachers also. If you're not yourself a frontline preacher, you can help others also. Everyone's got their part to play. Is that?
Tomorrow Krishna was saying in my lecture that there's no one who's rejected Lord Chaitanya and Prabhu's mercy more than some people in Bengal, because even though they've been born into such a good situation where they're in the places of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, some people openly become communists or Muslims or impersonalists. He said that Lord Chaitanya has arranged it in such a way that every now and then there's huge floods, and the devotees go out with food for light and prasada, and these people are professing to be Muslims and communists. They take short of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by taking prasada and coming with prasada. So this way they're all getting forced to get the mercy.
Yeah. It's a fact, Bengal's suffering. They're suffering because they have the greatest opportunity and mostly they're not taking it.
Also, Maharaj, they were showing in television just on the national integrity and unity. They were showing a caption from Srila Haridas Thakur's life history. And you can make a film on Srila Haridas Thakur's life history because he was a...
It's already been done.
He was born in a Mongolian family.
That was done already. It's done years ago.
It would be very nice because people...
Another thing for preaching in India is that all the devotees who are preaching in the West should go on preaching strongly and come to Mayapur. And because that, when people in India, sometimes it comes, from time to time it comes on the news in India. It came on the news recently for a few minutes on the national news. ISKCON in Russia, and it just showed so many temples and so many people chanting Hare Krishna. And it was a big item. So many people told me, we saw such a big movement in Russia. So another good thing, wherever you are, go on being devotees and preaching, and that helps us. We're all helping each other, just like if the movement's strong in India, that gives us some inspiration in other countries. And in Russia, if it's strong, that gives us... We're all in big family working together to preach Krishna consciousness all over the world. We also need the devotees from the West to come from time to time and show us that we are alive and strong in Krishna consciousness, and show the Indian people too. That will come on national television. Usually it comes every year, Gaur Purnima. That so many Western people in Mayapur, the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, dancing and chanting. So usually the national TV covers that. It has a big effect on people's minds. They're saying, so many people, they're coming here. And we tell people, just like in Delhi, we say to them, have you been to Vrindavan? No. We say, we see there's people coming from 10,000 miles away to come to Vrindavan, and you live 90 miles away and you're not going. What's wrong with you? You should go. Bhakti Sampradaya, yeah, that's also a Sampradaya, worshipping Krishna. It's prominent in Gujarat and Rajasthan. What about it?
They worship Krishna only in childhood?
Yeah, they worship child Krishna. Yeah, that's all right. Vaishnava Sampradaya. You won't find any philosophers in that Sampradaya hardly.
So people they are opposed by so many verses that they bring from the which we have.
What are they? Which verses?
They quote so many Upanishads to prove their point.
Well, I don't know. Unless you say what it is, how can I say? That Sarva Upanishadogama, Bhagavad Gita is accepted as the essence of all the Upanishads. And in that, Krishna says, Sarva Dhamam Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Braja. So that's the essence. There may be so many different things said, but when you come to the most important scripture, then this is what it says. Just like I was saying in Mahabharata, that Lord Krishna also, he says Lord Shiva is supreme. And somewhere else in Mahabharata, you'll find that Lord Shiva says Lord Krishna is supreme. And at the end of the Mahabharata, the verse comes that Vedai Ramayane Chaiva Purane Bharate Tata Adavante Chamante Cha Sabhatra Hari Giyate. That the conclusion is that all the Shastras proclaim Hari as supreme. So you have to see what is the ultimate teaching. And you have to, another point Prabhupada made is that in Shastra maybe said so many different things, but if you see what all the acharyas, who are the leaders of India's spiritual life, Shankaracharya, Ramanuja, Madhva, all the acharyas, they all say that Krishna, Vishnu is supreme. Another point, if you take what are the most important scriptures, Bhagavad Gita is accepted as most important, and Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is compiled by Vyasadeva in its maturity. It is Saram Saram Yudaharitam, Nigama Kalpatara Galitam Phalam. It is the essence of all Vedic literature, and very clearly says Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. So this if you're going to bring so many Shastras, you see what the conclusion is. And I don't know, what is that Shastra you're saying that proves that point?
Something that we don't know even though
yeah, so nothing will happen by just simply sitting. We have to do something. So everyone should do something. And actually there's another point you should put on here. The next thing is that some devotees should come and do it, having spoken about all this. Get your visa, long-term visa, and come and do it. Yeah, you should get the proper visa. You have to get a sponsorship letter from a temple, any ISKCON temple. 1-year visa or 5-year visa. Don't come on a tourist visa, because then you're going to have to leave after 6 months. Bring a little money, bring a sleeping bag. It's not always hot, it's cold sometimes. Bring a little warm clothing. and contact, like I was saying, some temple or some program. I can give you engagement if you want, whatever.
Yeah. Is it easy to preach with just one body or Indian body, and what is the difference?
It's an interesting thing that in India, generally, if an Indian comes to preach to people, they think this man's become a sadhu to fill his belly, so he's not very serious. But if a Westerner comes, they think, oh, he had so many comforts coming from the West, he gave them all up to preach Krishna consciousness, therefore he must be serious. And in the West, if someone preaches, a Westerner, they think, well, this guy's he's just some useless guy who he became a member of a cult. But if an Indian comes, they think, oh, he's from India, he must know what he's talking about. So we should export the Indian devotees to preach and import Western devotees here. But also, if educated people in India preach, educated Indians. And also, it's also they think, oh, because he could have had a good job, he's educated, they respect, he must be